Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Kramer. Our guest today is Sara Rothschild. She is a branding expert, and we are going to talk about all those important details that every business should be making a foundational piece of their marketing strategy. So welcome to the show, Sara.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited and glad we made this happen because I was looking at your schedule before. I actually have been living abroad for the past 2 years and I just got home last week. So I'm like readjusting to time zones and everything. So I'm glad we were able to find a time to connect and actually record this.
I've had a lot of guests from all over, and I've had guests that are traveling cross country and they're recording their interview out of like their motorhome, so that is the life of the entrepreneur.
Exactly.
So let's start by talking a little bit about your business so that our listeners get a sense of who is this woman and what is she going to be talking about for the next 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm a brand coach and designer, and I help coaches really craft that magnetic tribe building brand through scroll stopping stories and design. So I really get to know them on a deep level and get to know their ideal client on a deeper level. So we can really craft the right story and the right vibe that we want to be creating so that they can really start to build something that's for the long haul and not just a surface level something that maybe looks nice, but really a meaningful, impactful brand.
Why do you think it's so important that there's that congruency in branding?
Yeah, that's really at one of the cruxes of branding is consistency and congruency and creating a consistent story. And that's because at the end of the day, especially if you're on Instagram or something, it can feel like there's a really saturated market. It feels almost like I wrote a post about this the other day. It's like you feel like you're on a crowded subway, like everyone's stuffing in, trying to get their message out there. And branding is your tool to separate yourself from the competition, position yourself so that you're not even with that competition, and help you stand out so that you can actually attract those ideal clients. And consistency leads to things like brand recall and brand recognition, so that when someone comes across something associated with you, they already understand the experience they're going to get from you. And it's lining up every step of the way. So when they, get an email from you or get on a call with you or come across a podcast you were on, they know what they're getting from you and they trust that more. So they're more likely to build that know, trust, trifecta that everyone's after. And that's what consistency really brings, is someone knows what they're going to get from you. So it makes it a lot easier to say yes.
For those listening who are really thinking of branding on a very, very surface level, I'd love for you to take a moment and go into a bit more of the specifics of branding, because if you don't really understand it at a deeper level, it's very easy to just kind of skate over it. And then you lose the impact that you were just referring to.
Yeah, 100%. So before we even get into what branding does and what that tool is, let's talk about and define what brand is. So brand is really, it's like your reputation. It's that gut feeling someone's going to get when they come across something that you've put out. If they come across you, anything associated with you, that's what they're going to have. And that's what your brand is. So if you decide, you know what, I'm not going to really intentionally do branding, your brand is going to start to develop whether you do anything about it or not. And that means that every individual person that's coming into contact with something associated with you is forming an opinion about it, right? They're forming a relationship with it. So without branding there to help guide and shape it, you're going to have 100 people come into contact with you and have 100 different feelings, emotions, opinions about it. When you utilize branding to its full potential, you're going to start to shape it so that when 100 people come into contact with you, you're having 100 people have the experience that you want them to be having with your brand. So it's kind of a high level viewpoint of what it is, so people can understand that branding is an immensely powerful tool that you have to craft a powerful and engaging and impactful experience for not only your customers, but potential customers, your service providers that you work with, even your competition that you may collaborate with, everyone that comes into contact with you. And that's what branding can do.
So we've all been in situations where we're scrolling through social media and we have maybe friends that are newer in business. And there's a lot of incongruency and inconsistency in the message that they're putting out. So they're kind of just all over the place. It's almost like in those early stages when you haven't developed any clarity on your messaging and your branding and who you are and what you stand for and the types of people that you want to work with. It's like, they're promoting this thing that is, in this topic over here, and then they're promoting this topic over here, and then they're promoting something completely unrelated over there. And you're just, it's not impactful at all. So when you're working with your clients, do you find that sometimes you have to kind of like reel them back in and help get them grounded in that clarity first before you can even start to build those pieces out for them?
Yeah, I think the branding process, the strategic branding process, is really an exercise in clarity. It's all about asking those questions and going deeper because you have them in your head, and it's something about, I think it's just people really want to help other people and they know all the ways they could be helping. So they get distracted and they spread themselves too thin. And I know there's kind of this hot buzzword about being multi-passionate, and that's great. And you should be multi-passionate, but it's understanding how to rein it in and kind of connect the dots, even if things may seem kind of unrelated, but finding that cohesive storyline to tie things together. And I think that goes back to really understanding what the transformation is you're providing to someone and what really the benefit and value you're providing, and honing in on that as the message versus necessarily the product or the actual like mechanics of the service. And that can help kind of bring things that are all over the place. But yeah, I think throughout any process that I'm going with a client, it's definitely an exercise in clarity and getting focused so that we can find the right things to actually get dialed in on and not be so, kind of get that shiny object syndrome where you're trying to do everything at once versus focusing in on what your actual zone of genius is. And when you do that, right, you start to build that brand, you start to build that trust with people, and you can write that big idea. You can write those like 5 different, services you want to provide eventually on your like vision. Like that can be part of your big picture vision for your business. But focusing in and starting in first on like that one thing that's going to get you to the level where people trust you enough to start asking for that next service is the key. Because if you're trying to do 5 things at once in the beginning, it's going to be confusing for you. And if it's confusing for you, it's going to be confusing for them. So getting clarity in those early stages so that you build that trust will give you the ability to start adding in those other options.
So let's talk a little bit about the actual components that are involved in the type of work that you do, so that people have a better sense of, okay, well, I get that branding is important and I get that it has a lot to do with the service that I provide and being able to articulate that through my messaging clearly. But let's talk a little bit more now about kind of the nitty gritty, like the details of branding.
Yeah. So there's 2 main buckets when it comes to branding. You have kind of that strategy piece and then that expression piece. So it's always important to have that strategy done first so that you can translate it correctly into the expression. And that's where we got into, in the beginning where I was like, yeah, you can hit that surface level. You might have something that looks nice, maybe sounds cool, but if there's nothing on the back end to actually back it up, it's going to fall very flat, and it's going to miss that another buzzword, that authenticity that everyone's striving for. So that's a kind of key of like where those 2 buckets kind of stand. So let's start with that strategy piece. So you really want to focus on two main elements here, and that's your brand meaning. So that's things like your why, your vision, your mission, and your values. And then the next piece is your positioning. And your positioning is made up of knowing your ideal client, understanding your competition and what the competitive landscape looks like, and then defining your difference. And once you do that, you can really define what your position in the market is going to be. And when you have those ingredients, that's going to lay the foundation to really understand what actually is at the core of your brand, of what you do, why you do it, why it matters, and what makes you different. And then you get into that fun stuff, which is the expression. So that's building out your brand persona. So things like the personality, the tone of voice you want to be using, your brand vocab. So literally the words that are going to be, associated with your brand. It could be a made up language in some cases. I mean, look at Starbucks. We have like the venti and all that great stuff like that specific to Starbucks. So like little details like that. You have the more traditional, like that brand identity system, which are things like your logo, color palette, fonts, could be a mascot. If you're building a more personal brand, could be the clothes that you're wearing. And then we get to that presence, which is things like a physical store or a website or your social media. So those are kind of the main buckets when it comes to actually building a brand. That's kind of the anatomy of a brand.
And you work predominantly with coaches. So
Yes.
I'd love to go into that a little bit, because there are a lot of coaches. And we know that in most industries, with as many people as are on the planet at this time, and as many people who are aspiring to do their own thing as business owners, the market can become very oversaturated. And a lot of people start to just look and sound the same. So when you are working with your clients, are you finding that certain strategies, certain techniques, certain approaches maybe work better to help them extract out of themselves what is it that differentiates them?
Yeah. And I think the coaching industry is on the rise. I think it's, growing. It's a really cool industry, and it'll be interesting to see how it grows, because I think it's feeling oversaturated. But I think as it starts to grow, it's going to start to weed people out, because like you said, I think people are coming in with templates and, hire a coach that's just going, and they're just copying their coach instead of, actually digging into what their uniqueness is and the value that uniqueness brings, and actually letting that shine. And that's really what I help my clients with, is really tapping in to what makes them unique and identifying the value that uniqueness brings, because that's really what it's all about, what value that's going to bring to your customers. So that's just my little spiel about how exciting, the coaching industry is. But yeah, I think, one of my favorite exercises that I make all of my clients do, and that really taps into that brand meaning, is actually making them write their business obituary. And I know this sounds really like weird or maybe morbid, but it's a great exercise to get someone thinking about the big picture that they have for their business. And it gets them really excited, because they see like, oh man, I could do all this great stuff. I can help all these amazing people. I can be bigger than just a coach on an Instagram feed. And I think that's really vital, because so many people are locked into that grid of being on this platform, and it helps them really separate themselves from just that and see how big that they can grow. So that's one of my favorite exercises. And then other than that, it's really just, I like to call it my little bag of tricks. Like I just have these questions that just help dig a little bit deeper. And at the end of the day, I find like my job's to facilitate. My clients have the answers. It's just something about having to say it out loud and to somebody else really helps to draw it out. And then my job later is to kind of read between the lines a little bit and see like where they've said one thing here and another thing somewhere else, and find how those connect and like see really where that magic lies. So again, they have it in there. I facilitate it out of them and then use kind of my magic to find where those dots can connect and really hone in on what really does make them unique.
I love that. So you are demonstrating your own expertise as the coach to the coach.
Yes, exactly. And my expertise is listening. That's really at the end of the day what it is listening and kind of like interpreting then what they've said into what they maybe actually mean, and just putting that little touch of creativity, that little spin on it that they still connect with and that their ideal client will connect with. But yeah, my expertise at the end of the day is really listening and interpreting.
That's great. I love that. All right. So I'm going to turn the tables a little bit on you. Let's talk about you as the business owner. So you've had to go through your own mindset challenges. We all have. I'd love for you to share with us maybe one major mindset obstacle that you had to overcome in order to get to where you are today.
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me, especially even before I started my business and was just, maybe doing some freelance design work, was imposter syndrome, because I never went to school for design. It was something I was introduced to in school, but kind of learned on the job, and then just found like online courses to really perfect my skills and like just really fell in love with it. So not having that degree and feeling like I was kind of like a fake designer was definitely something I had to overcome. And definitely over the past, I would say, this entire year and even a bit before, I like got to a point was like, no, I'm really good at what I do. Like I kind of got over that hump. But I think it was just having support around me and actually just sharing my work and not being so scared to do that and getting feedback and really realizing like, no, this is actually good stuff. And a degree doesn't make it good. Like I made it good. So getting over that hump and realizing that was a big thing for me in those early stages of deciding to become a designer.
Imposter syndrome is a frequent issue that people bring up. And a lot of that has to do with our societal conditioning. We're told that in order to be the expert, right? Doctors have to go to school for like 8 years or whatever it is, right? And then they are the expert. You listen to them, even though their advice might kill you, right? So, but that is just constantly pushed on us. Go to school, do this, do that. And for a lot of incredibly talented individuals, in many cases, it's their natural inherent gift. Yes, they need to learn skills in order to really become the expert at what they do. But I personally would much rather go to a professional who has that natural innate ability, and then refined that with additional training and education and things like that, as opposed to just going to somebody who's gone through all of the motions and has all of the hangy things on their wall. There's a disconnect there if that's not really their zone of genius. And I think that's where a lot of times we run into problems with people who are the supposed expert. You go someplace and they're supposed to fix something, and you walk away from the situation worse off than you were when you went in. And how much of that has to do with the fact that they're not following their own heart's desires. They're not following their own passion, their own purpose, because if they were, they would be in a different headspace, right? They would be more attentive, more attuned, more acute, more intuitive about what it is that their client or customer needs. But it's really challenging for us to navigate all of that subconscious stuff that's been conditioned into us. And then when you add to that all of the other fears, doubts, and insecurities that you have in your subconscious mind, now the mind is just looking for some type of approval, some sense of someone bestow upon me the status that I need to feel confident going out into the market. And not everybody has that. Not everybody has that high level mentor or teacher who gives them that, you are officially bestowed, expert status. For me, I remember I had my certification as a hypnotherapist. I had my master's degree in metaphysical science. I'm doing all this stuff. And I was struggling with imposter syndrome early on when I had my hypnotherapy practice. And I was going to school for psychology and thinking, oh, I got to get this additional degree. And then I'm seeing, and this is no offense to anyone who is a licensed psychologist, because I think, again, if it's in your zone of genius, then wonderful, right? Then you should be doing that work. But as I'm going through all the motions and I'm in the different associations and I'm going through all of the conventional training and racking up tons of, student loan debt, because of my own insecurities that I'm trying to overcompensate for, right? By being this expert with that hangy degree. I was seeing that the results that I was getting with my clients through the modalities that I already was extremely proficient in were far exceeding the results that my colleagues with degrees were getting in this conventional therapy model. And at some point, I just had to stop and say, this is insane. The only reason that I'm doing this is because my ego is insecure. And it was an expensive lesson in imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Well, also so many things you said in that tie back to things we already talked about with like getting distracted and like shiny object syndrome and trying to do all the things. And I think people get thrown like tons of marketing strategies and they feel like they have to do everything, but like focus in on the things that you actually care about, right? And like you said, if you're passionate about something, it's going to be a lot more valuable to your clients and who you're serving than if you're just doing it and going through the motions. So I think if you like remember that, like that's one of your gifts that you have, and some piece of paper isn't going to change that.
Yeah. You've got to do the inner work. I say it every episode. I say it all the time. The inner work is so incredibly important. And when we recognize that we're bumping up against those fears, the solution is usually not to put a Band-Aid over it with more trainings, with more tactics or more techniques, or, a lot of times we just have to go inward and we've got to clean out the mess that is interfering with the success that we can be experiencing right now. And there will be a time where you'll intuitively feel it's time to up level. It's time to add more skills. It's time to add more depth to my marketing strategy. But it's always, always about self-honesty before you ever start taking those actions.
Yeah, 100%. And then when you do get to the point, you're like, oh, I'm up leveling because I'm excited about it. And like, I know this is going to add value for myself and add value for my clients. You're not just doing it because it feels like something you're supposed to do. It's something that actually feels like aligned with you and where you're at in your business versus just the society or because your competition is doing it. You're doing it because it's right for you and your business.
Yes. This has been a great conversation, Sara. How can our listeners get in contact with you?
Yeah, thank you. This was so much fun. I loved getting to chat with you. So you can get in touch with me on Instagram at Soloboss Design Co. Or on my website, solobossdesign.co.
Awesome. So let's leave with a final parting thought. So is there anything that you feel inspired to leave us with today?
I will say this is that you have a powerful story to share, and make sure you're sharing it in a way that's providing value to your audience, not just sharing for the sake of sharing. And make sure you're finding ways to place yourself as the guide and not just the hero in your story. Save that spot for your clients.
Awesome. That is a great way to end this episode.
Awesome.
Thank you, Sara.
Yeah, thank you. This is great.
And thank you to all of our listeners. If you haven't already subscribed, please make sure you do so. And until next time, we'll see you in the next episode.